George Floyd's life ended at the mercy of a Minneapolis police officer. His last words, "I can't breathe."
You changed the world, George.
What we endeavor to achieve is equal justice for the United States of America.
His death sparks a nationwide movement for change. Thousands take to the streets here in North Carolina, calling for reform for racial inequalities.
No justice, no peace, no justice. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Born in Fayetteville, Floyd's roots are planted here in North Carolina. And today, the Carolina community sheds their tears only to see the mission to fight injustice grow.
We will all, united as a people who are God's children, seek justice in His name.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us live at noon here on Spectrum News. I'm Caroline Blair. The community is coming together and remembering the life of North Carolina native George Floyd today. A memorial service got underway more than an hour ago. And joining me now from that memorial service in Raeford is our Capital Tonight anchor Tim Boyum. And Tim, you have been there all morning long, and this is certainly an emotional day, especially for those there at the service who are coming in, and it sounds like from all over the country.
Yeah, Caroline, no question about that. Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us for our coverage today. We have our David Ivey joining us here on the scene, as well as our Mary Helen Jones. We're going to go to them in a few moments. But as you're right, it has been a very emotional morning. The body of George Floyd in the hearse and his gold casket arrived shortly after 9:30 this morning. A huge crowd, cars as far as you could see down the main road out here, a huge line of people waiting to get inside. As you mentioned, we have seen people from all over the country. One woman we talked to drove 8 hours from Georgia just this morning to go inside. For those folks, it was very emotional. The sheriff of Hoke County, Hubert Peterkin, talked to us in the 10 o'clock hour. He was very emotional as both an African-American and in law enforcement. So it has been something to behold and watch this morning. A lot of emotions with that, but also a lot of hope for these folks. Let's bring in our Mary Helen Jones now, who's been here throughout the morning and now the afternoon with us as well. Mary Helen, there has just been so much going on as we're talking about, a lot of emotions too.
A lot of emotion, Tim, but a lot of people I've spoken with have called it bittersweet. There have been some incredible moments of support from the community, from those over 100 bikers coming through to the cowboys coming through on horseback to show their support. But like you, look at this video of the bikers. It was really incredible, and it was so loud for so long, that revving of the engines to honor George Floyd, who is laying in rest here today. Like you, I've been speaking with people from all over. I spoke just a few minutes ago to a young couple who drove here from Kentucky. They said they had the protest there in Kentucky, but nothing was going to stop them from coming here. They were thankful to the Floyd family for giving them the chance to come here and show their respects. But they said it was so hard when they walked in. The woman I spoke with, she said she wanted to look away, but she knew she couldn't. She knew she had to face this moment straight on to fully understand what was happening. And I also spoke to another woman. Her daughter was murdered at the age of 21, and she said that when she walked in, all she could hear was that video of George Floyd calling out for his mother. Take a listen.
That was emotional for me because his mother was gone, but yet he still cried her name. So for the family to do this, we thank you, we appreciate it, we'll never forget it.
Tim, those people that we've been speaking with saying that they came here to show their respect, but also because they want to be a part of history. They know that this is a groundbreaking moment in history that they just could not stay at home for, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. The stories that people are sharing with us have been just remarkable, and we thank them for sharing those stories. By the way, the memorial, that will take place about 3 o'clock this afternoon. It's going to be a private service. This is the public viewing that is taking place. That ends in the 1 o'clock hour. But we have seen people, as I mentioned, lined up near the street and down the street for hours now here in Raeford, which is just west of Fayetteville. And Fayetteville is where George Floyd was born 46 years ago. Let's bring in Spectrum News reporter David Ivey with more on what he has seen. And David, boy, you've been out there seeing those crowds for hours now.
Yeah, and it's been steady. It's been steady. People, the line is not as long as it has been, but folks are still coming through. And you guys have already talked about the powerful emotion, the gut-wrenching emotion that you can feel out here. But I've also heard people talking about this as a history-making event, and it's a possible catalyst for some change. Now, joining me now is a man who can talk to us a little bit about that, Mr. Jim Hughes, a Durham attorney. Mr. Hughes, I know you had a chance to go inside, so let me first ask you about that. Tell us what it felt like to go inside this church and see that casket.
It was a very somber feeling, very quiet and respectful atmosphere. It was moving, for sure.
You and I had a chance to talk a little bit, and everybody's been feeling, we've all talked about the emotion, the intensity, the protests. But for things to change, stuff has to happen after today. You're an attorney. You know about the legal world. Just share some of your insight with us, if you would.
Well, I think the real change that needs to be made is for all these people who are out here and all the people that are protesting all over the country to go vote. Vote for city council, vote for mayors and county commissioners. They're the people that are going to make the change. And they're the people that are going to enact the ordinances that put some restrictions on police. So it's important to vote, not just for president and governor and senator, but for all these local offices.
I got to ask you this. I've got a little age on me now. I think you do too. No disrespect intended there. As far as history goes, I can remember some very intense changing events. I remember when Dr. King was killed. Where does something like this rank in that pantheon?
I think this has been a much bigger event. We've never seen protesters in all 50 states, in big cities and in small towns. People, elderly people, young people, black, white, Hispanic. This seems to have galvanized the entire community. And that's why I say if it can cause them to go forward from this and do something positive, I think this can be a sea change event.
Mr. Hughes, I thank you for joining us. Safe travels to you as you head back to Durham. Guys, again, it's just overwhelming to be out here for this event. You've witnessed the passion. You've witnessed the history. And you've witnessed what folks are hoping will be an opportunity to maybe change some things in this country. For right now, I'm going to toss it back to my colleague, Tim Boyum. Tim, just a powerful event to be at today. It really is.
It really is, David, and to hear those stories and just talk, I think a lot of people just want to talk through this in a lot of ways, and this is just the beginning. As we talked about, the public viewing goes until 1 o'clock. There'll be a short break. Incidentally, his family has not been here today. They will be at the memorial service that starts at 3 o'clock. We know some family members are expected to speak, as well as Congressman G.K. Butterfield and Congressman Richard Hudson. We will carry that live on Spectrum News. Caroline?
That's right. We're going to be here with you throughout the day. Tim, thank you so much for telling these very important stories. Now, good afternoon, and we thank you so much for being with us live at 1 o'clock here on Spectrum News. I'm Caroline Blair. The public memorial for George Floyd in Hope County is coming to a close. The gold casket made its way from Minneapolis to Raeford, North Carolina this morning. You're taking a live look there at the scene, and here at the body being removed from the hearse. This is a look at George Floyd's body taken into the church, where we have since seen thousands of people line up and pour in. This was an emotional and history-making moment. Floyd was killed by a police officer in the streets of Minneapolis, and since then his death has sparked a wave of protest around the world, our country, and here in our state where Floyd was born. Today, we have seen the raw emotions poured out as the Carolina community says their final farewell. And we have team coverage in Hoke County today. Our Capital Tonight anchor Tim Boyum and our reporter Mary Helen Jones are outside the memorial where George Floyd's body lies and is being remembered today. Let's first go out to Tim. And Tim, what are you seeing now that the memorial is over?
So this is the public viewing part of what we're going to see today play out here in Raeford. It is wrapping up. They just gave a 5-minute signal to folks outside a couple minutes ago. So it is wrapping up as we speak. And by the way, we are in Raeford because many of his family members live here, including his sister Bridget, who you've probably seen on national news. And we're just about 22 miles west-southwest of Fayetteville, and that is where George Floyd was born 46 years ago. I myself just went in about 15-20 minutes ago. You need to put a mask on. You go by, and there is George Floyd in that casket. It is an open casket for people to see. They keep people moving. Everyone that is there that is helping out says thank you for coming. And after seeing the international headlines and seeing all the news and what has transpired since his death on May 25th, it is surreal to see the body of that man sitting right in front of your own eyes. And for that, thousands of people have come here today to see that and pay their respects. It's hard to comprehend. And for one woman we talked to, she came all the way from Thomasville, Georgia. It was an 8-hour drive this morning, and she wanted to just pay her respects. She knew it may be just a matter of minutes that she would see this. And she said, being from Georgia, obviously another case there recently, she just keeps turning the news on and wondering what's going to happen next.
You know, by the time we try to exhale and get our breath for one thing, then boom, we hear it again and again. And I just hope, I don't want it for no family, regardless the color or race. You know, this is pain, this is fear. And God doesn't want us to walk and live in fear.
And earlier today, we had a chance to talk with Hoke County Sheriff Hubert Peterkin. He's an African-American sheriff, was very emotional in that interview. He also gave us a copy of the program for the memorial service that will take place at 3 o'clock. So there's going to be a 2-hour break. The family was not at this part of the day. They will be at that service, and some members of the family will speak this afternoon, as well as Congressman G.K. Butterfield and Congressman Richard Hudson. We'll hear some music, and it is expected to be a packed house inside. And again, they are encouraging folks to wear their masks inside because of everything going on with COVID-19. Outside, again, there is a huge crowd that came here today, a diverse crowd for the most part, including parents and even their kids. For more on that, let's bring in Spectrum News reporter Mary Helen Jones. Mary Helen?
Yeah, Tim, I was able to speak with a mother who brought her 2 young children here, McKenna and Dash, aged 7 and 5. And I asked her, I know that you're having these conversations at home, but why did you decide to bring them here today? And she said, you have to be comfortable as a parent having those uncomfortable conversations, and that she knows her children are going to hear things at school and out in the world. And so she wanted them to be able to feel things. There's a difference between just being to be able to talk about something and to feel it and to be there. And she also just wanted them to see the community coming together like this in their hometown, coming together to be together and to celebrate the life of George Floyd. And now that we are at the end of the public memorial, I want to take a look back at some of the ways the community did come out. We have some video of over 100 bikers that came out revving their engines. First, they drove by on the road, revving their engines in honor of George Floyd, and then they actually came through the parking lot, and it was an incredible scene of people standing around them with their cameras up, with their fists raised, just celebrating the life of George Floyd. And there was also a group that came through on horseback, just different ways this community is coming out to be there for each other. I also spoke with another mother. Her name is Mary Chandler. She too said that she came out here today to see George Floyd because of her son.
It was kind of emotional. It was just like a quick in and out thing. But again, I am a mother, so I look at him as that could be my son lying there. So that's the way it touched me.
Other people I spoke with, a young couple came all the way from Kentucky. People are just saying, Tim, that they wanted to be a part of history and that they couldn't just sit home when this was happening. They wanted to come here and let the world know that they are here and they are going to continue standing up, packing the streets, and fighting for what they believe is right, Tim.
Yeah, Mary Helen, no protests around here that we've seen. Almost all the discussion has been about remembering who George Floyd was and what this country, what this community, what our state can do moving forward to make change. Now, this is with the backdrop of protests that have been going on. There's a huge movement in Washington, D.C. this afternoon. We can show you some live pictures going on in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at this hour. These are the sights and sounds that we've seen in cities all across the country, including communities in our own state this week. Largely while there were 1 week ago tonight, major riots in downtown Raleigh. The last few nights in Raleigh and even Charlotte and some other communities, there have been peaceful protests to remember George Floyd and talk about moving forward. So there's a live look at what's happening in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Back here in Raeford, North Carolina, the public viewing is wrapping up. And again, at 3 o'clock this afternoon, the memorial service will begin in Carolina. We will carry that live right here on Spectrum News.
Yeah, incredible visual images coming out of that public viewing and memorial there, as well as incredibly powerful words. As Tim mentioned, we certainly are going to be gathering a lot of that sound, and we want you to hear it, so you can head to our website, spectrumlocalnews.com, for more on that. Now, we want to bring you some background here. The first memorial for Floyd took place on Thursday in Minneapolis. This is the first of 3. Politicians, celebrities, and civil rights activists gathered alongside family and friends to remember Floyd's life. The Reverend Al Sharpton delivered the eulogy, the attorney representing his family there as well. And some attendees stood in silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, probably one of the most powerful parts of the day, with no words being spoken, because that is the same amount of time an officer kept his knee on Floyd's neck. After today's memorial in North Carolina, Floyd's body will be taken to Houston, where he was raised and lived out most of his life. A public viewing will take place at the Fountain of Praise Church in Houston on Monday. A private funeral service will be held the day after. Only family and invited guests will be allowed to attend the private funeral, similar to how today's private memorial is taking place. Everyone who attends is encouraged to wear gloves and masks to try and stay safe from COVID-19. And again, this is the final of 3 planned services to remember George Floyd's life. A massive protest is happening in our nation's capital today in the wake of George Floyd's death. Take a look here at a Black Lives Matter mural that was painted on the road leading all the way up to the White House. The 16 letters span 2 blocks on the 2-lane road, and DC's mayor hired painters to construct that powerful message there. That's the exact same road hundreds, if not thousands, of protesters are expected to march today. Our Washington, D.C. reporter Kevin Fry will be there covering that march in Washington in its entirety today. He's going to join us for live updates throughout the afternoon and the evening here on Spectrum News. Now, the killing of George Floyd has sparked a spike in donations. Specifically, the George Floyd Memorial Fund is climbing by the minute. At last check, the GoFundMe account has raised more than $13 million. The fund has also received praise by former President Barack Obama. George Floyd's sister, Bridget, who does live in Hope County, as Tim mentioned, also started a GoFundMe to help pay for traveling expenses associated with George Floyd's death. Her goal was to raise $5,000. It now sits at more than $350,000. On the national resource list, links to several other GoFundMe accounts are listed for the families of those killed by police brutality. And there's a guide available if you wish to contact your local officials to demand justice for George Floyd. An email template is made available on a national resource list. All you have to do is enter your name, your location, and personal reason why. You can let your local officials know that you want to see change in your community, and they are the ones to spark it. This is just one of the many ways that you can help. And certainly, if you were with us earlier this morning in the 10 o'clock hour, our Spectrum News anchor Tim Boyum, who we just heard from, was able to speak with Hope County Sheriff, who gave some incredibly powerful words. And as we mentioned in that live interview, we here at Spectrum News are going to be continuing the conversation, talking about the legal matters, the political matters that surround George Floyd's death. We will have much more on his memorial service here in North Carolina as the public viewing is wrapping up as we speak. The family service set to get underway in the next couple of hours. Stay with us right here on Spectrum News. We're going to have the very latest from You See It Here right inside this special church service for the very closest of family and friends of George Floyd as they continue to remember his life. We thank you so much for staying with us for our special coverage of George Floyd's memorial service here in North Carolina. I'm Caroline Blair. Today, folks are traveling into Hoke County from all over the country to remember Floyd's life as we approach the private memorial service set to get underway here at the top of the hour. Now, as the world continues to mourn, our crews have been in Raeford talking with members of the community. You're taking a live look here from inside that family memorial service set to take place here in just a few minutes. Many have shared what George Floyd's life has meant to them and what they hope to see right here in the future of America. Now, we saw a gold casket that made its way from Minneapolis to North Carolina drive up to the church this morning. You're seeing that right now. It was an incredibly powerful moment to witness as people looked on, some even chanting. And it was then that we saw thousands of people line up and pour into the building for the public viewing, some coming from as far away as New York and California. This is a look here at the lines outside that public viewing. Our crews at the scene told us people lined the streets for miles just to pay their respects. And our Tim Boyum has been there since the very beginning this morning. He joins us live now as we approach that family memorial service. And Tim, kind of break down the day for us, because certainly, you know, there has been a lot of emotion there.
Well, yeah, no question, and we just saw a lot of it in person. I don't know what you can see behind me here, but the family has been making their way in, and as we were standing back watching the family move in from those vehicles into the building, one sister and one brother came over. They said they just could not walk in and see that open casket and see their brother inside, and they began to just talk. They told us some stories about George Floyd, about playing basketball and football in high school and how tough it's been for them to see this. And they talked for a good 5 minutes to everyone here. And so the family members are still standing outside here, some of them waiting to go inside. I think we have a shot inside right now too. For about an hour now, we've been hearing choir singing inside. It's people have been filling in. I can see inside the building now too. A lot of people are still filling into this church here in Raeford. And by the way, if you are just joining us, I want to keep saying this because I get on Twitter, what's the North Carolina connection? He was born in Fayetteville 46 years ago. A number of members of his family still live in North Carolina. His sister Bridget, who you've probably seen on television, is from Hoke County. She still lives in Hoke County. And it was after North Carolina that George Floyd then moved with his family to Houston, Texas. That's where he largely grew up, and then wanted a fresh start back in 2014, and he moved to Minneapolis, of course, where he died on May 25th of this year. Mark, I don't know if you can hear me or see me, but there's a group of people right over here that he's going to zoom in on. That gentleman in the white suit to the left and the woman in the white suit, a couple people to the right, those are the sister and brother that made their way and talked to us. And even thinking about seeing his brother in that casket brought him to tears while talking to us. But you know what was interesting is when the vehicles came up with the family members inside, they waved to us, they smiled, and when the family came over to talk to us, they thanked us for being here. And today has been, you asked me what sort of today has been about. Today's been about remembering George Floyd, and also a day talking about moving this country forward in so many ways. And you just saw in that shot there, that was the Hoke County Sheriff Hubert Peterkin. We've been talking to him all day long. He has helped in a massive way planning this service for today, from logistics, even talking to the media. And he has been emotional. He said he wasn't sure if he was going to look in that casket and see George Floyd. He didn't know if he could. We talked to him just a short while ago, and he said he did. He thought it was important for him to see that. And I myself went in and saw George Floyd, and it is surreal watching all of this on news coverage over the last, couple weeks, and then seeing the riots take place right in Raleigh and Charlotte and other communities across this state and the nation, and then to see his body lying right in front of you. So, Caroline, it has been emotional, but A lot of people also wanting to talk about moving forward and how we can see change in this country, both from a societal perspective, but obviously law enforcement as well.
It's been an absolutely incredible day, to say the least. So much emotion. We just saw the family members, as you pointed out, his sister as well. It even looked like she had a lot of emotion just trying to walk into that building. Everyone wearing white in unity. And Tim, unity seems to be what we're hearing from everyone today.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of folks when you watch this service, you'll see them wearing white. When the family arrived in their vehicles and started to pull up, there was a group that we saw earlier that came with a huge batch of black balloons. And as they, just moments before they got out of their vehicles, they released those balloons. And you saw what, was dozens of balloons go up in the air. And so that was quite a moment to watch as the family arrived here. But I have been struck by how much people have said thank you for being here. When I went in to see George Floyd, everybody that was greeting everyone said thank you for coming today. And as you mentioned at the top of this coverage, they've come from California. We've talked to people from Georgia, people from South Carolina. One woman we talked to from Georgia, she drove 8 hours this morning to come just catch a glimpse of George Floyd. When she was done, she went back to her car and she said she was driving home. So it's a remarkable day. The big question, as the sheriff has told me, what do we do with this moving forward? How do we learn about this and how do we make changes?
And Tim, we saw, this is the second of 3 separate services. George Floyd, as you mentioned, born in Fayetteville, about 20-30 miles down the street. His family is still living there in Hoke County, many of them. We saw the first memorial service taking place in Minneapolis, where he was living at the time of his death. And we saw lots of people, celebrities, folks that we know from watching on television and hearing there at that service. But this service is set to be very, very different, very family focused, right? And set on George's life.
Yeah, and I've been told that's what the family wanted here. They wanted it to be about George Floyd. And so we're going to hear a lot about him and who he is. And we're being told that the casket is now making its way into the church, that gold casket that you have seen everywhere. We know that Congressman G.K. Butterfield is going to speak, as well as Congressman Richard Hudson.
And as Tim just mentioned, that gold casket coming in, carrying the body of George Floyd. He is now surrounded by those that loved him the most, his friends, his close family. Let's take a live listen in.